What?
Where are you?
What do you want?
To talk. We need to talk.
No, we don't. I'm fine. I just need some time.
Okay.
Goodbye.
All right, people, thank you very much for coming to the show. This is quite important and I love it. Thank you very much, Joseph. Thank you very much, Rosa. Thank you very much, Joram. Today we're talking about freedom fighters and independence. Love it.
Look at you in disbelief for like, are you serious?
Yes.
I'm very serious. Someone was worried that Rosa was seated on a stool.
Oh.
Today she's seated in a very nice pound chair, like the rest of the gentlemen.
Like
Someone was actually like, "Yo, why is Rosa seated on a stool and the two gentlemen are on brown seats?"
Because of patriarchy, seriously. Because of patriarchy, but we have crushed.
And I guess it's because Rosa's
people
have never been in power.
If they knew this is Rosa's office, if they knew she insisted on sitting on a ball.
I was working on my arms.
Yeah.
Well, the abs refusing, so that's why she got busy. Anyway, thank you very much for coming. So, last week was mind blowing. Just finding out what history, that kind of history, just opened up. Joram, part 2 was angry. Okay, you are riled up.
Passionate.
It was an opportunity to finally talk about things that
which is good. I mean, we were put in, we were bunched up, and this is one thing I remember Rosa always saying, that we were put together and we didn't want to coexist, you know, and need to even.
And some of us were separated.
Some of us were separated. You know, very many people are still in Uganda, others in Tanzania. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. Sometimes you look at it as a blessing in disguise. So, freedom fighters, okay? There's a lot that has been said, and there are people who've taken that mantle for themselves and said, we help this country gain independence. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times we're like, Kwani, the rest of the guys were just sleeping, sending these guys, you know, it was like a smoke signal.
Cheering squad,
you know. Pom-poms. No, tutapiga kelele lakini kutoka huko kwa hearts. Like, it doesn't make sense. Is it that guys never fought, or is it that these are the only people who are seen to be on the forefront and no one else was seen? Like, what happened? Why is it that Kikuyus think they're the ones who fought for this country only?
Well, let's start with the fact that we said that part of the history we learn is very selective,
right,
in terms of only highlighting certain parts of a story. I don't know if this could be a fact, but could it be that because Kenyatta was in power, was it close to 20 years, there about 17 years I think, could it be that the content of education was shaped to highlight that during that time? Because when you look at the history books, I think I remember reading about the Mau Mau. I remember reading a bit about the Koitalal, and Arab Samoy. Could that have highlighted during Moi's time to become more prominent? And then there was something about the Giriama. I can't remember who exactly. I remember a female Mekatilili. So in fact, the fact that I can remember those stories so well means that only very few stories were highlighted in terms of the roles.
The cow lady,
which, there was a Kamba lady. Yeah. Siokimau. Yes, I didn't know about Siokimau.
It's not just a place.
I might have missed that.
Actually, when you go to the station, the Siokimau train station,
it has
statues there.
Okay,
yeah.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. So you have 4 stories highlighted, and at the very least, what history should have done would be to say, where were the other 38? What were they doing during that time? Yeah. That's part of the problem here. In fact, that's myth number 1, that only these stories that were highlighted actually fought back. Myth number 2 is that those who fought actually took over power after. Okay? Yeah. There's a sense in which history shows that Kenyatta was part of the Mau Mau, which is not necessarily the case. Okay, yes, he went to prison and he was a figurehead for fighting for independence and all sorts of things. But even the people who were backing him in his immediate context were more of the Odingas, the Mois, the Shikukus, if I'm not wrong, the Muliros.
I even remember when you said last episode 2,
yeah,
Joseph, I remember when Joram was saying in episode 2 that Oginga actually said that we had that guy has to be set free.
Like
for us.
Kenyatta will have to be set free before we accept
independence.
the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily the Mau Mau. So there's stories of was it Kina Bill at Kagia? Who was this guy who's always on a bed? Dedan Kimanthi.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think the Dedan Kimanthi picture and the story of fighting for independence put together makes it look like Kenyatta, Dedan Kimanthi were boys and from the same cohort and fighting.
Yeah.
But there was actually the elitists who used to fly to London and strike deals. Then there were the guys who were out in the forest fighting.
Yeah.
And those two cohorts were very different. And even how their history turned out after independence was very different. And that's a story that's rarely told. Okay? And so I think just the beginning of this whole madness is the fact that we have a very skewed history that is highlighted. And so people grow up either feeling entitled or feeling excluded, yet I don't think it's only those 4 tribes that resisted and collaborated with the colonialists.
I'm actually glad you brought up collaboration because one of the things that I think gets lost in the story of these particular communities fought for independence and these ones did not is the idea that actually people within the same community had collaborators and had fighters. All right, so there are Kikuyu home guards. There were Kikuyu home guards. There are Kikuyu senior chiefs. Senior Chief Koinange, Senior Chief, I think do you want to say Waiyaki? Waiyaki Wahinga and others, right? So collaborators existing, at the same time, side by side, with the struggle, which to me points again to. I'm glad Joram brought up the idea of. When finally you have independence, you still have these two communities, or they are rebirthed in a different way. Because you still have an elitist group that has power, so the political elite, and you still have people from their communities who are still in the struggle in so many ways.
Right.
Such that I have said before, I'm proudly descendant of Mau Mau's, both my grandmother and my grandfather were Mau Mau, and they spent time in detention and so on. But their neighbors, are not necessarily Mau Mau freedom fighters. And there was a real cost to go into the forest or to being detained and so on and so forth that we still are feeling very keenly to this day. So I think beyond the complicated story of freedom fighting or the fight for freedom is not a singular story that was freedom was not delivered by one group of people, whether Kikuyus, Merus, and Embu. It's not a Gema thing. Beyond that is that it's much more nuanced than that within even those groups that are considered to have, quote unquote, fought for freedom, you still have different communities with different interests existing side by side.
And that leads me to why did they start the armed struggle? I think when we talk about the struggle, we end up talking too much about that struggle. We don't realize that each community, first of all, as we had said before, each community lived separately. These guys decided to conglomerate people.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, these guys have different interests and different grievances, which now leads to the struggle or negotiation or whatever it is that we want to call it. So I think we most of the time we end up talking about the struggle without looking at, wait,
why did they struggle?
Why did they start the struggle? And the reason they started the struggle, was it resolved?
I don't know. Why did they start the struggle?
You see, I have an issue. Haki too. Okay? I start a struggle. The struggle morphs. The reason I started Haki 2 has never been resolved. And I think that's our biggest problem.
I think I get where you're going.
Okay.
But I'd also wanted to say something else. There's also the thing that, remember we talked about the fact that there was a classification done by the anthropologists to say these are Luyas, these are Kikuyus, these are Kambas, these are Kalenjins. And so we are bunched up into all these. part of the reason why the colonialists did that was to divide and conquer. So that once they have these distinct groups, one of the things that again goes recorded in history is that they were able to take a Kalenjin to maybe a Luo area to be the home guard there, because it was easier for someone from a different tribe to oppress people from the other tribe. So the whole construct around just the concept of tribalism was actually to divide and conquer. And I was glad the article that you shared with us that we were reading that said the colonialists quickly discovered that tribe was a very easy tool to use to divide and conquer.
Yeah.
And when hands switched from the colonial masters to the Kenyans, first they said we are going to fight for unity for this nation, but soon discovered that tribe was a very easy tool to use. So even by the time we're getting to this armed struggle, there's already a background of, look, people have already been divided and conquered. We have people sent as chiefs and administrators in areas which are opposite to the tribes they come from so that they can be loyal to the Mzungu. So, and that came from across the board, because I've had friends, it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, where I was talking to some Kikuyu friends, and they're telling me that their parents had stories of being oppressed during the colonial period by Luos, and that was part of their fear why they did not want Luos to rule over them.
What?
Yeah. And I think upon deeper interrogation, it was just the fact that they probably were living in an area where they had either a chief or a district officer or something who came from another tribe. And so these tribes are talked about because they were the largest populous tribes.
Only interactions.
And they are also the people who lived in the areas where the missionaries came up. So they tended to be the educated ones who were picked up by the colonialists to be administrators.
Joram, that's very scary. Because think about it this way. This is a Kikuyu in central Kenya. Okay? He's never had an interaction with a Luo. The first interaction with a Luo is with an oppressive person.
Yes, an administrator whose loyalties are towards his employer, who's a colonialist.
Creates an attitude or an impression of a community that only presents itself through this oppressive guy. Oh my gosh.
And then they pass it down to their children, and their children pass it down to their children.
Oh my goodness.
But I think beyond the
without understanding where it came from.
Right. And I think sort of side by side with that, and with using different communities sort of in those subjugating and oppressing roles, one of the other things that colonialists did very well, and I don't know why we keep going back to colonialism, but one of the things the colonialists did very well is just dividing people and making them stay in their reserves. And we still use that. Some people still use that word.
No, excuse me, Rosa. It's not reserve.
Okay.
That's the English pronunciation. When I say manga, then the reserve.
Okay.
My people are being targeted again.
But the thing about the reserves is that you were in your different communities. So Kikuyus stayed in one place, and Kipsigis stayed in one place, and Mijikenda stayed in one place, and so on. And you couldn't, freedom of movement was not a real thing. You couldn't really move from this area to this area without, remember there's the Kipande system. Kipande system said that if I am to move from Muranga to go to Kisii, I necessarily need to carry my Kipande, sort of the way cows carry a bell.
The results you talk about were settlement schemes.
Yeah.
Where, so for example, you have Kikuyus, because the white settlers have taken up Muranga, Naivasha areas, they had to push those guys out somewhere. So where do they push them to? They push them towards Njoro, push them towards Eldoret. There were already people who thought that Eldoret Njoro area is ours. Okay? Because the earlier classification had said this is where the Kalenjins are from. But then you have Kikuyus being pushed out of the White Highlands, which is what we also call them, and into areas in Njoro and around Eldoret. Okay? So they are pushed into territory that is seemingly less productive, but pushed towards another community which thinks this is our land. Why are you guys being brought here?
Yeah.
No, but
Okay, and even after independence, they were not resettled to be taken back. And some of those schemes happened all over the place. You have Luyas in Kitale and Wasingishu. Okay, so there were settlement schemes where, I don't know where the Luyas were pushed out, maybe out of the sugar belt into those areas and told, you guys can settle here. So there were all these movements that were done by the colonialists, which were not undone after.
But here's the thing.
After independence, hence the clashes we even had in 2007. Because until now, we have Kales saying that
This is our land.
this is our land. Why are these Kikuyus here? Okay, and you have Kikuyus saying, look, my grandmother was born here, my mother was born here, I am 3 generations in this place, why are you pushing me out? I deserve to be here just as much as you do. So that's where some of these problems started to come up, and maybe that being pushed out is what, for the Kikuyus, started the armed struggle, because they did not want to be pushed out of their land and they wanted to reclaim it.
I'm going to bring out a very interesting worldview. What you just said is not unique to Kenya at all. What you just said is what happened in India. What you just said is what happened in South Africa.
Even in the US.
In the US, the same thing. And this is the trickiest part. So you put them in reserves. So you put them in reserves, eh? But now, when the Mzungu goes, and it's time for the African government or the preceding government to redistribute land. Remember, everyone is in the reserve.
Yes.
Okay? All of the situations that have happened in the countries that I've mentioned happen in such a way that it's not everyone that gets out of their reserve.
And goes back home. In fact, the 9 people who went to the Lancaster conference,
Yes.
one of the things they negotiated for was, okay, you're not going to harm the Mzungus who have already settled. So for those who choose to come back home, we are going to give you money as the British government for you to buy the land back from those who are Zungus and
That's fine.
resettle the people who were living there before.
That's fine. That's fine. But they don't do that.
Yes.
Of course they don't.
So what happens is, which is so weird, eh? What happened in '93 in South Africa? There were clashes, nasty intertribal clashes. At some point, the African was united against this white person. In '93, when people now are clamoring for power, when now the independence of South Africa was imminent, now there was intertribal fights. Nasty ones. And by their number, I don't know if you read a bit of history, a number of South African freedom fighters, politicians were assassinated because of that nonsense. Okay? So, but now the problem comes in again, which is also you see down south, also in Zimbabwe, where now the redistribution of land ends up being to very few people, and the rest are left in abject poverty. Which, funny, they now start blaming the enemy for the other tribe.
So
for their poverty.
As long as we could remember, you blame the colonialist, then when the colonialist is out of the picture completely, you have to look for somebody else to blame for why your life is as miserable as it is, and you don't have the land. And the politicians actually build up on the false narrative of why that fight is happening. And rather than telling the truth, that the reason why Kalenjins and Kikuyus are next to each other had nothing to do with them being rival factions, but had everything to do with how they were put together, a third party. That third party left. Instead of these guys being resettled back where they should have been, their own people took up that land. The people who took the land that was redistributed in Naivasha, in Murang'a, and also were Kikuyus elitists. Okay? And the same thing happened all over the country. if you were in government, you'd be able to get some kind of allocation of prime land, okay? And let me qualify, it didn't happen for the Kikuyus only, okay? Because my dad worked in government. I can say that like openly. And he was telling us when the redistribution was happening in Mpeketoni, if you were prominent enough in government, you'd actually get an allocation. It didn't matter which tribe you came from, as long as you were loyal to the government of the day. Okay, so it's only a few elitists who end up being redistributed to these very prime pieces of land, rather than people being resettled back where they came.
No.
So let me say something. Let me say,
Okay, all right. No, it's money. I can see, but we'll come back to that. I'll come back to that. But I think we just need to just hold it there for the first part of the episode before things.
I like 20 minutes.
That's how hot.
We finished 20 minutes.